All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming to our monthly developer ecosystem meeting. Quick run through of today's agenda. So first we'll discuss a couple changes to the format of this meeting that we've been thinking about. Then we're going to cover some of our thoughts around how we will better manage our dev tools in the long run. Some comments on ZEIP-39, which is StaticCallProxy, an update on the ERC-1155 proxy, update on ZEIP-28, and then we'll discuss some recent launches, including the StarkDEX POC, the launch kit front ends, and then the status of 0x mesh. And finally, we'll be having some ecosystem spotlight sessions by BambooRelay and BZX. So first, we've been thinking about implementing some changes to the structure of this meeting. So generally, we have been the ones proposing the agenda for each meeting. And I think that that'll continue to be the case for the most part, but we would also just like more general involvement, and we'll be sending out surveys beforehand where people can ask questions or add anything that they'd like to the agenda. I think we had a handful of people submit the surveys this time around, so thank you to everyone who did that. And in the future, it'd be great if you could just take a few minutes to continue to do that. It's a pretty quick survey. We also want to add an ecosystem spotlight session to these meetings. So if you've been hacking on something 0x related, and you think it's super cool and you want to share with everyone, please reach out to us and we can give you a short presentation slot in this meeting to share with everyone. So today, I believe BambooRelay and BZX are on this call, and we'll be taking a few minutes each to share their new products. We're exploring a few ideas for the future. So one of them would be rotating the time of this call to better match non-US time zones. If you have strong thoughts on that, please let us know. I'd be curious to hear, if there are people who can't regularly attend these meetings because of the time zone. Thinking of adding open office hours where we could just provide live technical support to people. Also, if anyone has feedback on the video conferencing software that we're using, please let us know. It seems like it's kind of all over the place. Currently we're using Google Meetings. I've seen people use YouTube. I've seen people use LivePeer, Zoom. So if anyone has feedback, please let us know. Or yeah, really anything in general. We're open to ideas, and we'll try anything and see if it works better. All right, so first I wanted to update everyone on our thinking for implementing developer tools in the future. Currently, most of our tooling is in TypeScript, and we have some support for Python as well. We, as part of the V3 initiative, we've been thinking about implementing a lot more of our developer tooling within the actual smart contracts. So one thing we could do here is just make more functions public. But in addition to that, and there's actually a ZIP after this, we want to create a separate dev utils package within our smart contracts that would just implement many, many more utility functions for developers. So one example of this would be something that could easily batch validate orders. We had an older version of this floating around for a while. It had a few quirks, and I don't think it was as widely used as we would like. But we will implement this in addition to many other things, anything like hashing orders or encoding or decoding data. And then, of course, doing all these things in batches to minimize RPC calls is super valuable. So once we have this, most of our tooling is actually within our smart contracts. We can just automatically generate these dev tools using ABI Gen. So we're already using this under the hood for most of ZeroX.js, but we're actually starting to implement this in Python. So we basically just need to write templates for each different language, and then ABI Gen could just automatically generate all of these developer tools. And like I said, one of the focuses here is actually efficiency and minimizing the amount of RPC calls required. So I think right now, like, you could validate around 500 orders in a single RPC call, which is super cool. And then for pure functions that don't actually touch the blockchain, we figured out a way to just do those calculations completely off-chain by actually feeding the bytecode into a local EVM. So yeah, pretty excited about this. I think once we have all this in place, we should be able to spin up libraries in most languages. And as part of this, I think a lot of our existing tooling would probably be deprecated as well. I also think that this would provide a lot of benefits for our documentation, because now you kind of have like this canonical implementation for all these different languages, and all the languages will handle all the edge cases exactly the same. All right, well, I guess I mostly covered this already. Did anyone have any questions about that before I move on? Cool. So we have started to implement ZEIP-39. So for those of you who aren't super familiar, this would add a new proxy into the protocol that would allow people to validate some arbitrary state on chain before actually performing a transfer. So you could say, like, my cheese wizard's power level needs to be above this level in order for this fill to be successful, or this crypto kitty cannot be breeding, or like this order must be within some bounds of this on-chain price feed in order to be filled. It's really pretty flexible. One thing we realized when starting to implement this was that this particular implementation is not actually usable for things like whitelisting. So let's say I wanted to create an order that would only be fillable if both the maker and taker were on some whitelist. The current recommended approach for that is to use a custom extension contract. We are hoping that you could do that with this static call proxy while preserving the existing UX of filling a 0x order. But with the implementation outlined in the ZEIP, you actually cannot do that. And that's because you do not know the taker's address in advance of creating the order. So our current thinking around this, and I added a comment in the ZEIP, is to actually just create two separate proxies for this. So one would just be able to query some arbitrary state on the blockchain, and that could query like a CryptoKitties contract directly. And the second approach would be to have this predefined interface that will accept the static call data as well as the from, the to, and the amounts. So with this second implementation, you would be able to create a whitelist. Curious, I know there have been a lot of relayers who have talked about implementing some sort of whitelist or KYC and things like that. And it feels like a large part of the reason that has not happened right now is because the existing UX of an extension contract is a bit clunky. So I'm just curious if anyone thinks that this is a super important use case that should be prioritized or anything like that, or if we should just go ahead and implement the first version first. All right, I will take the silence as being okay with implementing that first version first. So that should be ready pretty soon. Have a few more comments on that, but I will actually move on to the next slide first. So it seems like ERC 1155 is moving along nicely. The EIP for that is back in last call and hopefully can be finalized pretty soon. Consensus Diligence has done their first round of audits with us. They found a few issues which have been fixed, and we're kind of just adding some validation around some edge cases right now. That should be finalized pretty soon, and after the actual EIP is finalized, we can put the addition of ERC 1155 to a community vote. So the current thinking is to actually do a vote for this static call proxy and the 1155 proxy at the same time. So I wanted to touch back on the static call proxy a little bit. This proxy can only make a static call, which means it does not update any state. In addition to that, it is not authorized to call into any other proxies or the exchange contract or anything like that. The only thing that needs to be done to add support for this is to register the proxy within the exchange contract. So this means that the exchange contract, when it sees an order that contains this new static call data, it will know where to route that data to, and that's it. So this thing cannot ever touch user funds in any way. And I'm wondering how people would feel about if this contract is audited or not. Obviously, auditing takes time and costs money. And if we were to wait for an audit, it would probably delay the vote. Otherwise, I think we would be able to go ahead and vote for both of these proxies at the same time. How do people feel about that? And again, I
think we should audit everything that's put into production. Just even if it isn't modifying state, just I don't know, set a precedent for the future that any potential changes that are going to be put into production are formally audited in some way.
Okay. Anyone else have any thoughts? I think if we do that, we'd probably expect to do the vote in, well, I know there are a couple consensus diligence people on this call, but we'll sync up after and get a better sense for timelines on the vote then. So there's no huge update around ZEIP-39, more so just a progress update. The PR for this has been merged into the 3.0 branch. Quite a big change, touching a lot of parts of our code base, so pretty excited to get that merged in. And yeah, just quick recap. This would allow fees to be denominated in any asset supported within the protocol or batches of assets. And if the assets are the same as their corresponding maker or taker asset, then you're essentially just charging percentage-based fees, which I think simplifies a lot of the calculations and validation and stuff like that. Wanted to give an update on the status of StarkDEX. So yesterday we released the proof of concept for StarkDEX. So you can check it out at starkdex.io. This is taking actual trades that are happening on Binance. It's transforming them into a 0x-like order, which is then being filled on this, essentially a 0x side chain. This is all happening on the Robston testnet. Currently it's doing about 10 trades per second. I believe it could actually do much more than that right now, but kind of the limiting factor is actually just the time it takes to generate these proofs, and it's pretty expensive to generate the proofs. So, we could be generating more proofs in parallel, which would basically, increase our bills, which is why we didn't do it for the simulation. But yeah, check it out. You could get a good sense of how this whole system will work. Currently, although this is live on Robston, it supports pretty basic functionality, so you can make and take orders, but you can't do things like partial fills, you can't cancel orders. So no exact timeline for a production-ready version of this yet. I think it depends on a lot of things, and there's still some open questions around how hard it would be to implement these, but rough estimate would probably be like 6 to 9 months. I think another thing we need to think about here is the UX issues associated with the production-ready version. This uses different types of cryptography that are not currently supported in tooling like MetaMask. So all of that would need to be supported before really making this a seamless experience. And there's also a blog post about it if you want to learn more. Quick advisory around some tokens. We've been seeing some issues with validating certain tokens. I believe the foam token is an example of this. So they add extra requirements around transferability of these tokens, which means that you can't simply validate them by like checking balances and allowances, which is the kind of the go-to validation method for most of our tooling. So in the newest version of contract wrappers, there's a new way to basically simulate the transfer on chain before it actually happens. So it's not perfect, but you'll be able to tell if these tokens are transferable without necessarily checking balances or allowances beforehand. And there's actually a super nice way of improving this in V3. Very simple. I'll probably be creating a ZIP for it pretty soon. But yes, if you have not already and you're using our dev tools, please update to take this into account.
Okay, yeah. So we implemented the validation for foam token on Radar Relay. It just ended up making extra calls to our connections to Infura. So kind of taxed our connection there a little bit, and required a little bit of extra work to make sure that we weren't getting rate limited on that. So just be aware as you're implementing.
Okay.
It does work though. Just take a little extra fun.
Okay, thanks for sharing that.
So yeah, about the validation thing, in 3.0, I think we thought of a nice way where you could basically validate all these transfers in batches, but it won't actually be possible until 3.0 because it's built into the exchange contract. So we also relaunched, or I guess we launched the front end, or the two different front ends for LaunchKit last week. So there's really just a pretty good starting point for relayers. There's one front end for ERC20 tokens. There's also a front end for more of a marketplace with ERC721 tokens. And that one actually uses our Dutch auction extension contract as well. There are some interesting UX improvements in these. So I think if you don't have WETH or you don't have your allowances set, it'll automatically try to go through the forwarder contract. And then in the future, we plan on connecting this to 0x mesh as well. So yeah, again, this is, I would say, more so for projects that, you know, maybe they like have their own token or they have their own set of collectibles and they need to spin up a quick marketplace or something like that. And it's just a really good starting point. Everything about it is pretty customizable. And here's a screenshot of the ERC21. And here's a screenshot of the ERC721. There's also a nice wizard that allows you to spin this up if you don't actually know how to code. So yeah, check it out. It's pretty cool. Wanted to give some updates on 0x mesh as well. This seems like the hot topic these days. I would say is generally what we get the most questions about. So we're planning on launching the beta in late June or early July. It's possible that it happens sooner, but no promises. We actually open sourced this, I think it was about 3 weeks ago. So if anyone wants to check it out, please do. And it is also runnable right now. It works. There are some features missing. I wouldn't say it's 100% production ready, but it's getting there. It also ships with a better version of Order Watcher, which uses one of our extension contracts to validate orders in batches and minimize the amount of RPC calls that you're making. So I think it validates something like 500 orders per RPC call. The beta will not have full browser support initially. There's a handful of things that need to be changed in order to fully support that. The list of things that we've implemented in Mesh in the past month. I'm not going to pretend like I know the low-level details of all these, but if you have questions, I believe Alex Brown is on this call. Yeah, so I think if you're interested, or even if you just want to run a better version of Order Watcher, I would definitely check this out, give it a shot. And I think one of the most important things that has been implemented this month is adding JSON RPC API over WebSockets for interacting with Mesh. Anyone have any questions about this before we move on? Will it be compatible with iOS and Android?
I can answer that. We haven't done any testing with iOS or Android. It certainly seems possible. It depends a little bit on how WebRTC is implemented in things like WebKit for iOS and whatever Android's version is. If you just wanted to do it in browser on a mobile device, that's probably a bit easier. If you want to make like a native app-like experience, I'm not sure. It might be possible, but we haven't tested it yet.
Is it correct that this version of Order Watcher won't be available as a separate package?
We're still trying to figure that out. It's not a separate package right now. It just depends on how everything fits together.
Cool. Thank you, Alex. These are a few of the questions that we got in the surveys that we sent out. So one is, how will StarkDEX and zero-knowledge proofs impact 0x protocol fees, especially with regards to batch transactions? So it sounds like this is referring to the new proposed token economics and kind of the built-in protocol fees. I I think it should reduce the average fee by a good amount. Like I said, I think a production version ready of StarkDEX is somewhat far out, and it'll be a while before it achieves true feature parity with 0x. So I wouldn't be surprised if the first version of this doesn't actually have the protocol fees. The protocol fees are also very tailored to the fee structure of Ethereum itself. So if 0x is on different blockchains or even on a side chain, it may or may not make sense to do the exact same thing. So it's a bit of an open question. But in general, batching will drastically reduce those fees. There have been some questions about this in the ZIP itself. And yeah, this is actually the next question. How will fees work in V3, especially related to NFTs or tokens that have low individual value but high volume? So my recommendation for that would be to try to batch those assets with each other. So, if you're selling 5 NFTs together, you're only going to pay the fee once. And your average gas cost will be lower as well, especially if you're using an 1155 token that is pretty efficient from what I've seen. I guess my other answer to that is I think if the protocol fee is really a limiting factor for an NFT marketplace, then I wonder if gas costs will end up being a limiting factor at some point as well. Just because, the addition of the protocol fee doesn't actually change how your total fee is going to scale with a trade, right? Like it'll essentially double the total fee, but that fee will still scale linearly with the amount of trades that you do. So you don't want your marketplace to be extremely susceptible to a high gas price market either way. It also seems like, so EIP 1559, I believe it is currently slated for the next Ethereum hard fork. And this kind of proposes a new fee structure for Ethereum, which I think would actually lower average gas prices by a good amount. So that would also lower the net protocol fee. So yeah, I think that would probably be a pretty good change for everyone and low value tokens, especially. What is the timing of the coordinators, 0xV3 and 0x Mesh? Which comes first? What are the dependencies?
Do you mind if I jump in here just for a second?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Yeah, because it looks like, another person, David, mentioned that single trade NFTs are important to him as well. I think, like, Amir's points, I agree with Amir's points that basically since the fee scales pretty much linearly with the gas price, it won't, it won't be, high gas prices just generally will kind of limit the trade size to most likely if there is like congestion in the network. And the protocol fee, wouldn't like materially impact that very much beyond like just the gas market spiking up. But I do want to say that, so there's a lot of different moving pieces in the proposed token economics, but like big picture, like inputs and outputs, if people are paying these protocol fees for small trades, NFTs, etc., almost all of that is going to go to the market makers, and the market makers could be providing liquidity for NFTs and stuff like that as well. Or if you're actually like an NFT issuer, so like you're a game that is issuing tons of cards or items, technically you're also providing liquidity. So the protocol fees that are generated from your activity could just be cycled back to you. You wouldn't be paying twice the gas fee per trade if you are basically receiving the proceeds of that liquidity reward. You would be paying like a very, very small fraction above the gas price, or the current gas cost of a trade, rather. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Yeah. So with NFT and digital collectible markets, I think it is a little bit different from highly liquid ERC20 market. So market makers are basically just, like people that have trading infrastructure set up and are providing liquidity across exchanges. But for like a NFT, like a small NFT marketplace or something like that, the game creator or the token issuer would actually be the one that's technically providing liquidity. And so all the protocol fees would, necessarily just cycle back, assuming that they have a staking pool set up or something like that. Well, still not sure I understand how the refund part works. So maybe we should do another separate session on this, because I don't want to get too far off track from the agenda. But yeah, if it would be helpful to do another session on how the token economics work, like big picture, would definitely be happy to do that in like the next call or something like that. Yeah, just feel free to let us know if that sounds helpful or not. All right, sorry, Amir, passing back to you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for that. And then also just quick update on the token economics. It is being implemented right now. I think it'll be mostly done within the next 2 weeks or so. And at that point, we could release more documentation on it outside of what we have. I think what we have is very technical. There's a white paper, there's a blog post, and a video. But I think it'll be more clear once the code is actually out there and there's a spec for this thing. So I think that'll probably be a good thing to discuss for the next meeting. What is the timing of the coordinator, 0x v3 and 0x mesh? Which comes first? What are the dependencies? So all these things are pretty independent of each other. And they're all happening at different times. So the coordinator has actually already been launched, and BambooRelay is actually the first relayer to adopt this. And Joshua is going to be giving a spotlight presentation in a couple of minutes on this. So yeah, really excited to see how that turns out. And yeah, the server implementation is out there. The smart contracts are out there. There's a spec out there. So please check it out if you're interested, and feel free to ask us any questions or provide any comments if you have thoughts. 0x v3. So we're targeting a code freeze by the end of June. But it's hard to give an exact timeline because the code needs to be audited after that. This is going to be put to a community vote as well. I think some of the changes are actually more controversial than they have been in the past. So it's hard to give an exact timeline, but sometime in Q3 is my best guess. And then once V3 is released, the coordinator will need to be slightly updated, but it shouldn't be a big change. There should just be minor improvements that come from V3. And then 0x Mesh, as I mentioned before, planning a beta release of this at the end of June or early July. And that will currently work with V2 orders, and I'm guessing will require a small update for V3 as well. But in general, all these things are pretty independent of each other. Any other questions I could take at the moment? All right. So I think we have both Joshua and Kyle on this call. I'll let you two take it away. Maybe we could start with Joshua. And if you have anything to share on your screen or anything like that, feel free to do so.
Hey, yeah, it's Joshua from BambooRelay. Sorry, I don't actually have a presentation ready at this time, but I thought I could just talk about what I've done with a coordinator recently. Yeah, as Amir highlighted, it's, you know, the code base for that's now live. You can go onto GitHub and download it. What that requires for relays to do is to run a coordination server, basically just another piece of infrastructure you need to run. And you probably need to make some changes in terms of looking at soft cancels, which are made through the coordination server. You'll need to look at that and update your order books if you are integrating that into your existing infrastructure. It does offer soft cancellations, which I think is probably one of the biggest limiting factors to probably user experience and liquidity at the moment on the open order book model. But the greatest advantage here over probably the closed order book model is that it preserves networked liquidity, which means that open order book relays that adopt the coordinator model are still able to share orders between each other and have a shared order book. So in terms of that, it would be great if other open order book relays who are or would be interested at looking into that. Yeah, maybe to reach out on Discord. We can have a chat about that. People have any, concerns about integrating it. But it would be good to see more open relays get involved with that and see if we can, run it maybe across a few relays and see how it works out for, I think, the user experience as well would be good to look at. It's kind of hard to probably test its impact at the moment, just having it running on one, so BambooRelay. So it could be cool to see that across a few. Just another thing quickly, I've written some of you guys would have seen for Hummingbot, I've written a connector for BambooRelay at the moment. I'll be the next few weeks upgrading that to support the coordinator as well. So if other open relays or relays are looking at Hummingbot integration, then you can probably take advantage of the work I'll be doing in the next few weeks as well for the coordinator on that front.
That's really cool. Thank you for doing that, Josh.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, thank you. Been making really great progress. I just had a quick question. You're actually mirroring orders from Radar at the moment in addition to your coordinator orders, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So at the moment, the order books, I think I was mirroring other open relay order books as well. I think Radar Relay has the most liquidity at the moment, but certainly not limited to that. So yeah, so at the moment, if a user places an order, I guess, through BambooRelay, it's possible to take, a batch of orders that contain both Radar Relay orders and coordinated BambooRelay orders as well, which is pretty cool.
Very cool.
Does everyone feel like they have a good understanding of, the value prop of the TEC and the difference it can make in terms of like bid-ask spread?
I missed what you said, the value proposition of what?
Just like the trade coordinators concept.
Trade coordinators. Okay. Thank you.
I don't know if it could be helpful for NFTs. I don't know how efficient those or how liquid those markets will get, like in terms of like items moving back and forth really quickly. In any case, I'm skeptical that a coordinator would be necessary for NFTs, but maybe.
Yeah, to me, the main value proposition is, you get the ability to do these cancels for free, and then there's also a 1 second delay in between when someone requests to fill an order and when that fill is actually approved. So if you're market making, like you don't actually ever need to cancel orders until you see that someone has requested to fill your particular order. And once you see that, you have 1 second to decide if you want to let that go through or cancel it. And this just gives market makers a huge advantage. They basically don't need to, have their orders be filled unless they think they're going to make money on that trade. So the idea is that this would promote much more liquid markets.
Yeah, the other side of that as well is I think at the moment, a lot of orders on the open order book model kind of expire in 2 minutes. So you get down to the last 30 seconds and they kind of become unfillable. So something you could use with the coordinator as well is to give, even if you are going to expire orders, in a 2 minute period, you could give them a 3 minute or a 4 minute sort of expiry and then preemptively just soft cancel those before it gets closed. And that just means that users are less likely to, run into reverts just before, their transactions included in a block as well.
Yep. And then also, if this wasn't made clear, one of the benefits is that the liquidity from TCs from coordinators can be consumed by other smart contracts. So this would be things like Fulcrum or DYDX or what have you. They could also ideally get the benefit of this greater liquidity and better pricing. If no one else has any questions, or sorry, Josh, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to say that's probably about it from me. If other relays want to have a discussion about implementing it, or I guess having a wider discussion around that, maybe we could have that either in Discord or at the forum would be great.
Cool.
Well, I'd like to say, Josh, thanks for sharing what you've been learning as another relayer. I really appreciate that, and it's really interesting to hear what you've been working on. So thanks for spreading the knowledge. Yeah,
sure, no problem. I think would be nice instead of just reading about what everyone's doing in a relay report, if we could all have a moment to share as well.
Absolutely.
Kyle, do you want to give us a summary of Fulcrum?
Yeah, sure thing. I can share my screen if that works.
Sure, yeah, I will stop presenting.
All right. You guys see my screen?
Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
You guys see this? It's on the Fulcrum website.
Yes.
Okay. So we launched Fulcrum on Monday. It's a platform for tokenized margin lending and tokenized margin trading. It uses a peer-to-contract system where reserves are pooled, and then traders can go and take those trades in order to enter into leveraged positions. So, we launched with about $750,000 of liquidity. It's pretty simple to use it. We'll show you right now. You just blend and then say, okay, you want some small amount, and that's it. You like the loan is already done. You just wait for the blockchain to update. The trading experience is really quick. You just go, you select your level of leverage, you hit buy, you hit however much you want to buy of it, and that's similarly that's it. That's all there is to it. We're using right now Kyber Swap for some of our liquidity and our price feeds and all that, but we have a 0x exchange wrapper that's integrated with it. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking advantage of 0x liquidity from RadarRelay, BambooRelay, folks like that, and we're going to be loading it up on the front end where when traders are closing their positions, we're just going to automate the process of grabbing the best 0x orders and closing it along, adding that liquidity in along with Kyber in a sort of optimal fashion to get them the least slippage. that they can. And eventually we're going to be working on adding 0x liquidity into our margin calling system as well, so that people can be incentivized to bring 0x orders insofar as they reduce slippage from, like, say, filling it on Kyber. So those are the things on the agenda of Fulcrum, and yeah, that's basically it.
Awesome.
Nice.
Congrats
Looks really
on the
good.
launch.
Thanks, guys. And oh yeah,
user interface looks really good.
oh thanks, guys. Yeah, just wanted to give a shout out to Joshua. You know, great job. You know, you seem to really be on top of all the latest tech, always integrating it. Really big fan of the project.
Yeah, BZX lending is integrated into BambooRelay as well, right?
Yeah. So you can use Bamboo to do BZX lending and use 0x liquidity there. It's this Joshua being at the front of the curve for a lot of tech. So definitely a lot of respect for that.
Yeah, it just supports the peer-to-peer loan side of that at the moment. I'll be looking at the Fulcrum tokens probably when I get time next as well. But
yeah, we're playing with the idea of getting those pools and maybe making them available on the order book. There's going to be some quirky aspects to that since they are on chain, but it would be interesting if you were able to use those sort of pools to bootstrap liquidity on an order book and then get more off-chain liquidity there as well. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts about that.
And we've been having a few discussions about that internally. It seems to make a lot of sense. Like, you know, if you're a market maker, you have some cost of capital, right? And you could be literally loaning these assets out up until the point a trade is made, and that's essentially what you would be doing by trading these I tokens, right? So yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense to me.
You know, and just thinking about it for a moment in terms of getting the reserves on the order books, like the 0x order books or Bamboo or anything like that kind of has this open order book model. I think it might actually be kind of similar to the process of mirroring Kyber onto 0x. I think you guys are doing some work on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that was kind of something we're thinking about, and going to be looking into making a pull request to make the BZX orders compatible with the 0x mesh.
Awesome, thank you. And yeah, I just also wanted to say,
I was also interested in that as well.
Yeah, there are a small handful of different lending protocols that seem to have been getting some traction. And I actually just wanted to give a shout out to you, Kyle, because you released this article a while ago that talked about like the different trust models of all these different protocols, and I thought it was really good. I think that aspect of all these things is pretty opaque a lot of the time. So yeah, if people are interested in all the differences, definitely check that out.
Yeah, I would actually love to get a link to that. By the way, my name is Elizabeth. I'm CTO of etherblockchain.io. I've spoken a couple times, but my icon's not on the list because I called in. But I would love to get my hands on that article by Joshua if a link can be shared.
Oh, I think he was talking about, yeah, it was me. I'm Kyle, by the way. I shared it in the chat.
Okay, great. Fantastic. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, that is pretty much all we had on the agenda, but if anyone has any questions about anything, happy to answer them. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Joshua and Kyle, and thank you everyone else for joining. We will see you next month.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for leading this. This was really interesting and informative.
Yeah, enjoyed it. Thanks, Samir.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Bye.
All right, guys. Have a great afternoon.